I want to introduce you to Jeffrey Parker. He's the CEO and chairman of ParkerVision. He has been sitting on this story for a long time. Am I correct on why you haven't said anything?
You are correct, Glenn.
Okay. We are at the beginning of seeing corruption exposed like never before, I think, in America. This story, first of all, what did you invent that changed the world?
So we have a team I pulled together of inventors,
Mm-hmm.
and we invented the connectivity technology that connects your smartphone to the cell phone tower, connects the Wi-Fi in your home to other devices. It's so small and so efficient that it's what's enabled the tiny little Bluetooth headset that goes in your ear.
Wow.
Before ParkerVision, all these wireless connectivity products had big hundreds of components, a lot of size, high power consumption, low battery life.
Right.
And so we were able to put all that on a tiny little computer chip about half the size of your little fingernail.
What do you suppose that's worth now, that patent?
Oh, well, many, 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 many billions, if not tens of billions of dollars.
Okay. Because it's used by everybody now.
There is not a smartphone, a Wi-Fi product, a Bluetooth product, even the radar in your automobile that doesn't use this technology.
Okay, so you invented that, and you knew you had something big, and Qualcomm came to you and said, show us this new technology.
Well, actually, we were looking for a partner.
Okay.
So we approached them,
Yep.
and this is around 1999, 2000. They were, at the time, a much smaller company, but growing fast. They were an emerging tech giant. And they had the idea of connecting the internet to your cell phone through their standard, which I thought was pretty brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem they had was that the radio transceiver that connected it all was like the size of a small shoebox.
Right.
So while we were walking around with phones like the size of a candy bar, their phones were like much bigger.
Right.
And the batteries would last 20 minutes while everybody else's
It's like going
phone.
to the old 1990s and 1980s cell phones.
Right.
Yeah.
So we said, here is the connectivity technology that gives their cell phones the ability to compete and yet still have all the features that they were trying to bring to market. And when they saw our chip and tested it in a lab, they were crazy about it. They were like, how are you doing this?
Right. So you signed NDAs, you went into negotiation with them, and what happened?
Glenn, even special NDAs. We were very concerned because we knew what a big breakthrough. I mean, we thought at the time, and today even stronger feel, this was one of the biggest breakthroughs in wireless communications ever.
All right.
I mean, for 100 years, we built wireless communications before this technology the same way, same circuits. So we made them not just sign NDAs, we made each individual who was going to get the disclosure how this technology worked personally sign the NDAs. Where do you live? What's your phone number? We wanted to be able to track and keep it to a very small group of people. And so they didn't like that at the beginning, but they eventually said, okay, we'll do it.
Okay. And so you go into, they test it, they know how it works. And when does the negotiation fall apart?
Well, here's what's crazy about it. So after they saw the performance, they said, we would love to license this and put it in our chips. But they said, we can't license it until we know how it works because we don't know what we're licensing. So we said, okay, you're under this special non-disclosure. We'll do it. We go and we have an off-site meeting with them, with just the people in the company who had signed the NDAs, and we disclose how we do this. And after the first hour of what was a couple-day meeting, they stopped the meeting. And the guy who was the business development manager takes me out into a hallway, and he says to me, wow, you're not going to believe what we thought you had put into that chip. And I said, what do you think we put into that chip? We thought you had built a micro machine. A micro machine, Glenn's like little tiny components that move in semiconductors. Okay. This is back like in 1999 now.
All right.
And what he didn't contemplate was we had figured out how to do this using standard capacitors, switches, standard electronic components. Mm-hmm. I mean, this technology could have been built in vacuum tubes 100 years earlier. That's how revolutionary it was. Didn't require new materials. So he was explaining, wow, we were so impressed with this. It had to be something, and like outer space type technology.
Right. But now that we know that it's so easy to make.
Now that we know,
yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
So we've had this licensing negotiation, and every time we got to kind of an agreement point, they would change the deal. And this happened again and again, almost over a year. And at some point I said, I've done business with other companies. I've had relationships with large companies. We brought some of the first semiconductors to heating, air conditioning controls and had a partnership with Carrier Corporation, and it was great. But this one didn't feel right. And so we went our separate ways. And after that, it was a few years later, they come out with this new lineup of chips for smartphones. And their market share was like around 30-some%, and it was actually falling. And they come out with these new chips, and they are unbelievable in performance and low power consumption and fast data rates. And I'm looking at these going, what have they got in there? Now, to get into a chip and reverse engineer it to see for sure is like looking for a needle in a haystack.
Correct.
And it can cost you many millions of dollars, and you never find out.
Okay.
So we kind of just had to hold our breath, and we thought, well, maybe they came up with their own alternative technology. But we couldn't see anything else that they might be doing. A few years go by, and a conference paper is published by one of their groups, their engineering groups, and they're bragging about a new cell phone chip where they put an entire third-generation cell phone on a tiny chip, the whole thing, like a cell phone on a chip, everything. And at the heart of that chip, by their own conference paper, is our technology.
So what did you do then?
Well, I went to attorneys. And I went to my patent attorney, who's been one of the most successful patent attorneys in the country. And I said, Rob, we just discovered this. What do we do? And he goes, we're going to, by the way, he sits on our board of directors. He's told me many times, he says, in a patent attorney's career, if you get 3 real breakthroughs in the whole career, he says, this is one of my breaks. So he wanted to sit on our board of directors.
Right.
So I go to him as a board member and a patent attorney, and he says, we're going to have to file a patent lawsuit. And I said, well, can't we just go and talk to him? And he's like, no, that would not be wise.
Right.
So we filed a lawsuit in 2011, and all kinds of fireworks started then. I mean, it was crazy. But to cut to the quick, within 2 years, we were at trial. It was pretty efficient. And what happened in discovery was real eye-opener. The law firm, it was actually here in Dallas, Texas, a firm called McCool Smith, known for handling a lot of patent litigations for patent holders. And about a year into the case, getting ready for trial, they call me up and they say, Jeff, when we have a client come in, tell us a story, and they leave, we talk about it as a group and we say, gee, if half that story is true, it's probably a pretty amazing case. We just got the emails from Discovery. Your entire story is in their emails. We have never seen anything like this.
What does that mean, your entire? So that what you said was happening
was... Glenn, I was worried. When we broke off the negotiation, went our separate ways, I had this suspicion, and my suspicion was founded. So we take it to their lab, they test it, they send around emails to each other. Oh my gosh, we can make a better phone with their chips today than what we're currently shipping. These were prototypes. This is the holy grail of RF. We must get our hands on this technology. This is an email sent by the president of the company around to everybody. And then we start to see the engineers are a little upset, right? Because they've got these engineers being paid a lot of money to run a big R&D lab, and here's this little startup company. And they're like, well, do we really want to give them free money?
Jeez.
Quote, free money. Okay. So we walk in with one of the biggest advances in wireless, and their view is it's free money. And by the way, we spent hundreds of millions to develop this. This wasn't like 2 guys in a garage.
Right.
So anyway, ultimately, I saw in their emails where they're saying, hey, don't tell him how good this is. Keep him down. We want him to be, we don't want to help him.
Right.
And then ultimately they say, oh, don't tell him how much money we're going to make on these chips. And that's kind of what broke off the negotiations, is they said to me, well, where do you get your royalty rate from? And I said, I calculated the money you're going to make on these chips. And they say, oh, no, you're assuming our margins are much higher than they really are. They're like half of that. Well, in the emails, you know what they said? Don't tell Jeff Parker. He thinks our margins are X%. It's really even more than that. So, this whole suspicion that I had is right in their emails.
Right.
But the email that's really the smoking gun is they took a few years to try to develop their own technology after we broke it off. And a few years later, there's two engineers on email talking, and they're like, how are we going to do the next generation chip? We've got to keep our company, moving in the right direction. And they say, you know what? Let's just go back and look at the ParkerVision technology.
And you have that in writing. You have those.
These are the emails that the jury saw in our first case.
Okay, so the jury hears this. They come back united on a verdict.
Unanimous.
Qualcomm has done wrong, has got to pay you.
Yes.
The judge comes out and says that.
Yes.
But then something happens with the Obama administration, and Eric Holder gets involved. I can't imagine what your life has been like for the last 10 years, sitting on this story, waiting for an opportunity for justice to be done. So the judge comes out and says, Qualcomm's going to have to make amends here and pay. We're going to come out in a couple of weeks with the judgment on that. The jury was in lockstep. Qualcomm has stolen your technology. And then what happens?
So the judge tells both ParkerVision and Qualcomm, you guys need to get together and make my job easy. Tell me, what should the ongoing royalty be? So go off, how much you have to pay for each unit that you use for the future use. And by the way, get it to me within 30 days. There was a sense of urgency. He wanted to close the case. Well, 9 days after we were asked to do that, there's a fundraiser at the chairman of the board of Qualcomm's home. President Obama is the chief speaker, the lead speaker at that fundraiser. By the way, the chairman of the board of Qualcomm has been a longtime supporter of President Obama, going way back. And 8-9 days after that fundraiser, there's a visit to ParkerVision's website. Now, how do I know that? For years and years, we've used a product called Leadlander, which is a service you subscribe to, and they look at all your visitors, and we use it for marketing.
Right.
Oh, this person's interested. Let's call them up. Maybe they want to do something. Well, I go on my computer like I do every day, and I'm going through the visitors, and I see Qualcomm visited. Oh, that's interesting. They visited a second time. Huh, that's unusual. They visited a third time. That's really unusual. And Executive Office of the President of the United States. And I paused, and I'm like, what? And you can click on that visit and see, what did they look at? And we had a lot of things to look at on our website. Products, charities we sponsored, technologies. We only looked at one thing: patent litigation against Qualcomm. That was it.
Wow. Okay.
4 weeks later, the judge has his order entered. And you could have knocked me over with a feather when 7:30 on a Monday morning, I get a phone call from someone who says, Jeff, why is our stock price dropping out of the sky? And I go, it is? I mean, this market isn't even open. And he says, I think it has something to do with the judge's order. And I go online and I look at the order, and he has reversed the jury verdict and thrown the case out. I did not see that coming. Our litigators did not see that coming. When we left that courthouse after being told to negotiate an ongoing royalty, and that courthouse was packed with people.
Why? What was his reason for doing that? What did he say?
Basically, he decided after the fact, after the jury's gone, everybody's gone, he decided that there was a term in our patent claim that needed to be defined. And it needed to be defined in the only way it could be defined, which, by the way, is completely unsupported by the patent, and I'll explain that in a second, in the only possible way that would read the infringement right out of the case. He basically decided that something called a capacitor, which is one of the components used in our technology, would perform down conversion from a radio signal to the data. Glenn, without getting too technical, capacitors can't down convert. It's physically not possible. Okay? And so that's how he did it. And of course, Qualcomm had in their papers written to him, which is all, by the way, attorney argument. They never even put up a witness at trial on why they don't infringe. So here we had on our side of the justice scale
Wow.
the patents, the emails, the expert testimony that we gave from our expert. I mean, there was loaded with information for the jury. And on their side was attorney argument. That was it.
So how do you think this went down? Do you have evidence of how this went down, from the visit from the White House to the judge?
Well, look, all we know are the facts of the White House visit,
Right.
the previous fundraiser about a week before that.
Right.
But then we started looking more carefully at our Leadlander, and we found something else that we had missed, and that was a visit by the Department of Justice. And we thought, Department of Justice? And then we started doing a deeper dive, and we came to realize they hadn't visited just once. They had visited again and again and again and again, and not on every visit, but on many of the visits. On the same day, Qualcomm was visiting, and the same number of pages was looked at.
So it's like they're having a conference call.
It's like they're having a conversation.
Mm-hmm.
We, from about 2 or 3 months before the jury trial until a couple of years ago, there are 37 visits by the Department of Justice. 37 visits.
So the story gets even more twisted in a second and much more obvious when a firm in Washington, D.C., a lobbying firm that Eric Holder worked at and works at now gets involved. I'm going to spend a few more minutes with Jeffrey Parker. He is from ParkerVision. He is the CEO and chairman. And he's been telling a story that is absolutely amazing. It's game-changing technology that this little firm invented. Qualcomm, according to him and according to a jury, stole that technology, used that technology, gave that technology over in China, and never paid him. Judge then, after the jury verdict came back, he said, okay, you guys got to work out a deal. And then a few weeks later, after Obama met with Qualcomm and you got the DOJ involved, suddenly the judge flips. Here's a little snippet of a video that was released this morning at 7:30 Central Time, just right before the market opened, explaining what's going on. It's called Against_Giants. Listen.
We're explaining to him we're going to have a new chip that's going to have this amazing level of performance, this radio signal that we're putting into this tiny little circuit board with a chip on this board that's like half the size of your little fingernail. A radio signal, when it goes from, let's say, a cell phone tower to your phone, doesn't show up in great condition. There's all kinds of noise that has been accumulated along the way. So we've got this noisy signal going in, and out the other side of this chip is coming beautiful data bits, ones and zeros. We see this technology as being the enabling technology for wireless communication. What we didn't see was that it would be stolen. Never in my wildest imagination did I ever see that coming.
There was a company that I didn't know anything about called Qualcomm. If you look at history, almost all innovations come from small companies. And when big tech gets a hold of it, they're just out of the picture.
We had this off-site meeting.
They came out of that meeting very, very excited.
When they explained what they were doing, I go, man, it sounds a lot like what this engineer had described to me. And David looked at it and said, wow, they're using our stuff.
And then came time to get lawyers involved to say, okay, we believe that Qualcomm was infringing.
We filed the lawsuit in 2011. In about 2 years, we were at trial.
And so this first trial, after we filed the lawsuit, was pretty quick. We were there for 2 weeks and we received a unanimous jury verdict. They found in favor of ParkerVision, and
We ended up getting the 9th largest jury verdict. Everybody leaves the courthouse excited. There's going to be an ongoing royalty. The judge is going in our direction. Away we go to the next steps. The judge enters his final order, reverses the jury verdict, and throws the case out. What happened between those 2 points?
What happened between those 2 points is the Obama administration, it appears. And now let me bring Eric Holder into this, because the DOJ keeps going to your website, is checking on all of this right after the fundraiser with Qualcomm and Barack Obama. And he comes from a firm in Washington that is actually represents Qualcomm, correct?
Yes. Well, one of the largest lobbying firms in Washington is the law firm of Covington and Burling. Qualcomm has been one of their largest customers for a long time. And the Attorney General of the United States under Obama comes from Covington and Burling. It's Eric Holder. And then when Eric Holder retires from the government, he goes back to Covington and Burling, where he is to this day. So we have visits when Eric Holder is Attorney General. They start, and they continue on for years and years. Candidly, up until the time I filed a Freedom of Information Act request to ask, number one, who from the White House was visiting our website? Mm-hmm. Who? We know the computers inside the White House, but we don't know exactly whose computer. Mm-hmm. It's different DOJ sites that come to our website, but many of the days Qualcomm is on the website, and they're looking at the same number of pages. So we wanted to know, is there some collaboration going on here? Is Qualcomm and the DOJ talking about ParkerVision for some reason? If so, we'd like to know what that's all about. You know, I don't get an opportunity to have special access.
Right.
So we never got that FOIA request.
Never produced it.
Never produced it. No. We were told different stories. One party who tried to help us with the FOIA said that they told them they lost it. An attorney told me
my dog ate my homework.
You can't lose a FOIA. You get a case number. It can't be lost. Another party told me, oh, you were supposed to give them more information and you didn't do it, so they closed the case. I mean, it's excuse after excuse. And candidly, when I've watched other people within our own government try to get their FOIAs fulfilled, people who are sitting members of Congress, and they can't get them filled, I'm saying, well, how am I going to get mine done?
Well, the reason why you haven't heard this story at home is because he's been doing all of this with a very hostile government, and things are changing. And, you know, I would ask, I know Pam, and I know a lot of the people are now going to be in charge of this stuff, and I'm going to reach out personally. If you happen to know anybody in the administration, have them look at this. All you have to do is go to against_giants on X. Just search for it on X or Instagram. They're going to release several of these videos making the entire case. This needs to be investigated. This needs to be opened. Why is this important just beyond you and your little company? Why is this important?
Look, Glenn, the news this week was about how China now has come out with AI that's now leading our AI that's better than our AI.
Right.
A lot of questions where they got it, how they got it, but here's the deal.
Huge.
A lot of big tech companies went to China initially to get cheap manufacturing labor. Mm-hmm. But then the Chinese Communist Party said, no, if you want to do business in China, you got to bring your engineers. You have to set up shop to develop products here.
And you have to show us how it is made.
You must turn over your intellectual property.
Correct.
Look, you can't make these kinds of chips without our technology. Qualcomm just acknowledged in their own report a month or two ago, now has their own 5G chipset. They don't need a single chip from the West. How did Huawei come to develop their own chips? Well, I can tell you how. If you look at LinkedIn, you'll find engineers who worked in Qualcomm facilities in China and other places are now working at Huawei. I found an engineer just the other day who moved from Qualcomm in the exact space of our technology, radio frequency transceivers, is now at Huawei and High Silicon, which is their semiconductor company. So, of course, our intellectual property is moving to places that we don't want it to exist. There's a story out in a Taiwanese magazine called Digitimes. I don't know if it's accurate, but it claims that Qualcomm has 5,000 R&D engineers in China.
This is cheap labor. That's intellectual labor.
Yeah, we're not just shipping off our manufacturing jobs. We're shipping off our ideas. And how do you protect those ideas if you hand them over?
This is, I've been talking about this for a few days now, and it's been a theme of mine for probably 30 years about what's coming with AGI and ASI, which is absolutely game-changing. People do not have any idea that by 2030, you won't recognize anything. You may not even understand the solutions that are being developed every single day for your life. And it is so important that we own that we're in charge of it. I don't even trust us with it, quite honestly. But if you don't have the right people in charge of it, God forbid it goes to China, we're toast.
Well, listen, you have a good right to be worried. If our large tech companies, big tech, are willing to take these kinds of intellectual property overseas and put them in China, India, Taiwan, where we have no control, you can only imagine what could happen. And if they get ahead of us in this race, we're in big trouble.
Yeah, people are comparing it to the space race. That's not even that's baby stuff compared to what this is. I mean, it was a big accomplishment, but that changed the world in many ways. This is the Manhattan Project on massive steroids.
Glenn, the other area of our economy that a lot of people don't really understand, many of the biggest innovations ever, in fact, I'd say most, don't come from giant tech companies. They come from individual innovators and small companies.
Yes.
And our government is failing those companies.
Yes.
That is a story that needs to get out there because look, China has a very robust startup economy right now. This is why they're beating us.
Yes.
We have to reinvigorate that. You can't reinvigorate that when you take the ParkerVision's of the world and you demonstrate your patents are worthless. We're not going to defend them. The patent office itself has become hostile to patent holders through a whole special patent court that was set up during the Obama administration.
Yep, I remember it.
I won't go into that detail.
Yeah, I know it.
And then last but not least, we let big tech companies crush these little emerging monopolies, crush these emerging companies. And you know what the consequence is? Nothing. You get to spend yourself into oblivion in litigation. And even if you win, which we did, then somehow, some way you lose.
Yeah. I will tell you that, the reason why America is because of Ben Franklin. He was an inventor. Thomas Jefferson was an inventor. They developed the patent system, said these big corporations could not come in and crush you and just take it. It was your property, your intellectual property. That's why we raced ahead of everyone, because the individual who had an idea could make a better mousetrap and actually see the gain from it. It wasn't taken by the state or by a lord or a lady or whoever. We've crushed that now. If we don't clear up all of this garbage, all of this corruption in our DOJ, in all of our government, we are going to lose. And you're right. I think it's, Stu, do you remember? It's like 80% of all jobs in a down economy are created by small companies. You don't have an economy, at least in America, without all of these small companies. And they're on their heels right now. We have to protect them in any way that we can. By the way, one last thing on this. This is exactly what Eisenhower talked about in his farewell address. In his farewell address, he said, there's a vast military-industrial complex. That's not all he warned about. He warned about a vast education complex as well. He diagnosed exactly what we're in right now. But he said there will come a time, if we allow the government to get out of control, where all inventors, all ideas will come from government or educational laboratories, and the small guy who just has an idea in his garage will not be able to compete or keep his ideas. We're there. That's why this matters. I want you to find this information. I want you to call your congressman, and we are going to make sure this gets in front of Pam Bondi and everybody else, because this is a really big deal. We have to have small inventors. You can find out more at ParkerVision.com. You can go to Twitter or Instagram and just search for _giants and find out all of the information. We will talk again.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Jeffrey Parker, ParkerVision CEO and Chairman.